In a world where the material seems to dominate all, there exists a silent, ancient, and eternal principle that transforms the lives of those who discover it: the invisible altar. It is not built of stone, nor found in visible temples, but in the heart, in consciousness, in the words spoken with faith. Inspired by the profound revelations of Emma Curtis Hopkins, the teacher of teachers in Christian metaphysics, this text is not merely a guide to tithing. It is a sacred invocation, a golden key that unlocks the secret chamber of the soul where true giving dwells. This is not about obligation or numbers. It's about energy, decree, and alignment with the source. Because when you give from the invisible altar, that inner place where you know yourself as one with the infinite, every offering becomes an act of creation, a bridge between the unseen and the manifest. Prepare to remember what your soul already knows, that giving does not deplete. It activates the law of divine return. That true tithing is not measured in coins, but in consciousness. Welcome to the invisible altar of the tithe, the true offering. Here begins a sacred journey into true abundance, the kind that never runs dry because it flows from spirit. The truth is, it has not been born, it will not be born. The Spirit does not need us to understand it in order to act. It works because the human mind is not a fallen shadow, but a divine instrument destined to reflect the splendor of the principle. Every thought that rises toward the summit, every idea consecrated to the light, is a priestly act. There is no purer act, no holier offering. This book does not address the analyzing intellect nor the fluctuating emotion, but the very center of consciousness, where the I Am intones its eternal song. Here, understanding is not requested. Presence is demanded, because only those who present themselves before the altar of the mind, as one enters the sanctuary, will comprehend what this text proclaims. The tithe is not a tribute to the world. It is not money, nor ritual, nor an external portion. It is the thought offered first. It is the deliberate choice to look to God before the problem. It is the silent gesture of one who gives the principle its place before human judgment occupies it. This book does not say, "Think well and you will do well." It does not trade in the higher. This book affirms, when you think of God, everything else becomes truth. The conserved thought does not seek results. It manifests them. It does not wait for approval or effect. It radiates them. Because elevated thought is not just one action among others. It is the very root of all reality. There is no tithe without a temple, and there is no higher temple than the mind in silence when the I Am is pronounced without fear. Here it is taught that the mind is not the enemy of the spirit, but its throne. Here it is declared that there is no need to seek other altars. You are the altar, you are the priest, you are the door. Every time you give God your first thought, you have kindled an invisible flame that transforms everything it touches. It will not be seen instantly by the eyes, but it will be known at the center because truth is not begged for, it is recognized, and the recognized manifests. This work has been written for those who have heard without hearing, for those who have prayed without results, for those who have given and not received. Not because giving has failed, but because the mind had not been the altar. External acts without elevated consciousness are mere repetition, but the invisible act of thought delivered to the spirit is a decree that does not return empty. Whoever understands this will no longer speak in vain, will no longer pray as a beggar, will no longer look to heaven as if it were outside, because they will know that the altar has already been built and the fire already burns. Thought is the incense, the word is the offering. Attention is the key. Do not fear if you do not yet understand. Truth does not submit to your understanding. It transforms your understanding. Just open the book as one opens a temple. Do not ask what you will get. Ask what you can offer, because only the one who offers their thought first will see the kingdom first. And that kingdom will not come from outside. It will rise from within like a sun that needs no dawn. This is the invisible altar. Here no study begins, a liturgy opens, not to repeat what is known, but to declare what has never ceased to be. Because the Spirit does not wait, the Spirit is, and you are its first priest. The Invisible Altar of the Mental Tithe. Based on the teachings of Emma Curtis Hopkins, we have noticed that more than 80% of those who visit our channel are not subscribed. You can support this project by pressing the subscribe button and liking the video. Thank you for inspiring us to continue creating more and better content for you. Are you ready to transform your life? Chapter 1. There is no power outside thought. The Spirit is, and being it is cause. Everything that appears to the senses as world, circumstance, need, or effect is nothing but the reflected image of the thought that sustains it. There is no power outside thought because there is no cause outside Spirit. Thought is the tool, the channel, the rod of authority of the Spirit in the mental world that precedes all that is visible. What is called life, what are called problems, what is called system, are nothing more than forms assumed by unconsecrated thought. Nothing has been born without a mind first having harbored it. No one has suffered without first worshipping an idol in their mind. No one has lived scarcity without first allowing a thought without an altar to take the throne. There is no scarcity, no debt, no chaos. There is only unenthroned thought, because when thought occupies its rightful place, the illuminated center of consciousness, everything else aligns with the law that has never ceased to operate. Error has no substance. It only has the permission of whoever lends it attention. Here it is declared that there is no external power capable of imposing any condition on the being who thinks from the I am. The appearances of the world are the garments of a distracted consciousness. They are the result of a tithe given to error, to habit, to judgment, to fear. Those who believe the world determines their substance have forgotten that the mind is the source of all true substance. The tithe is not charity, it is not ethics, it is not virtue. The tithe is a mathematical operation of the Spirit. To give God the first thought is not a favor, it is a formula. The first thing thought determines the entire equation of the day. The first thing named establishes the field from which all experience will be harvested. If the soul's first thought is, "There is lack," all that follows will be the result of that sowing. But if the first thought is, "God is my supply," not because one wishes it to be so, but because it already is, then everything else can only reflect the perfect order of that inner mathematics. It is not about thinking well. It is not about wishing harder. It is not about visualizing with effort. It is about understanding that thought is cause, and that everything that does not conform to truth must be discarded in the mind before attempting to correct it in the visible. The visible is not the enemy, it is the consequence. There is no effect without prior thought. The reader who has tried to solve problems without first elevating their thought to the throne of the I am has worked in vain. Shadows are not removed by fighting against them. A light is lit, and that light is born from enthroned thought. Whoever sees a problem and first seeks an external solution has lost the order of the Spirit. The Spirit does not respond to effort, it responds to principle, and the principle establishes that what is elevated first is manifested first. To tithe is to consecrate thought before doubt occupies it. It is to pronounce the name before noise invades it. It is to look to God before looking at the bill. You cannot serve two thoughts. You either tithe the Spirit or you tithe the shadow. Every thought is already an offering. Every thought is already a sowing. The question is not whether you tithe, but to what you give first place. Nothing is more sacred than the first thought of the day. In that moment, the altar is decided. In that moment, the throne is chosen. If the first thought is elevated to God, no shadow can endure. If the first thought is worry, fear, calculation, or complaint, then the altar has been given to illusion. The Spirit does not share the throne, the tithe is not divided. What is consecrated cannot be mixed. It is either offering or distraction, and every distraction is already worship of what is not. The mind that says, "I have not," has decreed emptiness. The mind that says it is difficult has built a wall, not because the world imposes it, but because thought has chosen it. But the mind that says, "God is my abundance," not because it hopes so, but because it knows, and has built an altar, and upon that altar every appearance must surrender, because truth does not bend, it establishes itself. And when it establishes itself in thought, it manifests in form. There are no exceptions, no lost cases, no karma, no history, no social structure that can resist the power of consecrated thought. The reader must understand this. No more money is needed, no more opportunities, no more contacts, no more time. Only one act is needed, to elevate thought to its rightful place. Everything else will come because it is already contained in the law. It is not called miracle. It is called principle. It is not called luck. It is called spiritual intelligence. And that intelligence does not reason from the world, but from the Spirit. The mental tithe is the formula that restores that lost order. It is the decree that returns the crown to the I am. When the soul becomes accustomed to giving its first thought to God, scarcity loses its dwelling because it finds no home where thought has been sealed with truth. This is not a visualization exercise. It is an establishment of sovereignty. It is a priestly act of the self that recognizes its source. When thought is conserved, life is straightened. When thought is enthroned, matter organizes, not by effort but by law. The Spirit does not demand external offerings. It demands that the mind remember who inhabits it. The tithe is not given out of fear nor obedience nor expectation. It will be given because it is the only true order. Everything else is chaos with form. Whoever sees this teaching and does not practice it will know why the world remains a mirror of disorder. But whoever tithes their thought every morning, every moment, will see the kingdom move without friction. Because where thought has been set in truth, truth manifests without measure. There is no power outside thought, no cause outside spirit, no limit outside the mind that has forgotten its altar. The reader needs no other technique. They need to remember that everything is already given, and that the act of remembering is the act of consecrating. Thought is the key, and the altar is the mind itself. Here begins the true tithe. It is not given to receive, it is given because it is already possessed. Because the one who consecrates thought to truth becomes a channel for all that has never lacked. Chapter 2. The Mental Law of Multiplication. The law does not wait, the law does not test, the law simply is, and as it is, it operates. The moment thought is consecrated, multiplication begins. It does not announce itself, it does not hint, it does not calculate. It manifests because the mental law of multiplication is not activated by emotion, desire, or morality. It is activated by principle, and principle shows no favoritism, makes no distinction between great or small, nor questions the merit of the one who decrees. It operates with the same precision over the soul that remembers its source as over the universe that spins endlessly. The law of multiplication does not require faithlessness, it requires elevated thought. Whenever thought aligns with truth, expansion occurs. It is not an effect, it is an immediate reflection of recognition. To give one's thought to God is not only to elevate it, it is to allow the law to do what it has always done without opposition, because the only resistance that exists is that of divided thought, double-minded thought, thought that fears while praying, that asks while doubting, that consecrates halfway. But when thought is pure, whole, without mixture, without calculation, then the only tithe the Spirit recognizes has been given. The tithe of the mind that already knows it lacks nothing. The external tithe gives 10% of the visible. The mental tithe gives 100% of the invisible. And in that act, the visible multiplies beyond all human logic, because the logic of the world is based on addition. The law of the Spirit is based on multiplication. What is consecrated expands. What is given becomes a spring. What is placed on the altar of thought rises to the plane where neither lack nor loss exist. From there, multiplication is not a miracle, it is a result. The mind that understands this stops bargaining with God. It does not think, I will give so that I may receive. It knows that by giving from truth, all has already been given, because the law does not respond to desire. It responds to principle. And the principle states that every consecrated thought begets its own reflection in form. That is why there is no waiting between giving and receiving. There is only alignment or misalignment. The moment thought is ordered, the world adjusts. If the visible result delays, it is because the mind has looked downward again, has asked again for what it has already decreed, has sown doubts on what was sown. But if it remains fixed on the truth, if it does not retreat, if it does not lower the scepter, then it will see how the invisible takes form without human intervention. Many have believed that giving money is a sign of faith, but have forgotten that the most powerful currency is thought, that the gold of the Spirit is consecrated thought, that true abundance does not begin in action but in contemplation. It is not about doing more. It is about thinking, who knows that everything has already been done? The I Am does not work. The I Am proclaims, and in its proclamation that which never lacked multiplies. Because where there is truth, there is no lack, and where there is lack, no truth has been established. The reader who repeats affirmations without elevating their thought continues calculating. The reader who visualizes without consecrating continues begging. But the one who rises in the morning, sits in silence, and consecrates their mind to principle has already multiplied it. Even if they don't see it yet, even if their accounts still say otherwise, even if their surroundings scream the opposite, because the law has already operated. It does not depend on witnesses, and it does not wait for approval. It needs no evidence. The law responds to thought as the seed responds to fertile soil, without effort, without doubt, without delay. The mental tithe is not taken to a temple of stone, but to the temple of the hour, because the only true altar is the present moment, when the soul chooses to think from the Spirit. There is no more exact formula. There is no more infallible system. Every time a mind offers itself whole and without mixture to the truth, an ancient law as old as God is activated, multiplying without limit all that has been offered in purity. Multiplication is not proportional. It is transcendental. What little is offered in spirit becomes much, because what is offered is not quantity, it is vibration. And where there is pure vibration, there is pure reflection. The reader who understands this will no longer ask how it will work, because they will know it has already worked, not because they feel it, not because they desire it, but because they have decreed it from the height of true thought. Here it is established without ambiguity. There is no delay in the law. There is no test in the Spirit. There is only consecrated thought or divided thought, and only one multiplies, the other distracts, one builds, the other confuses, one offers, the other withholds, one raises altars, the other raises arguments. Only one bears fruit, because only the thought delivered to hold truth is recognized by the law as worthy to reflect it. There is no need to wait, no need to repeat until it works. Thought must be elevated once, with totality, with sovereignty, with recognition, and the law will do its work, as it always has, as it always will. Because the law needs no help, it only needs the mind to stop interfering. The reader can today offer their first thought. The Spirit does not need beautiful words, it only needs pure alignment. One can say silently, I consecrate my mind to truth, I give this thought as a tithe, I declare that all is done. And with that they will have given more than 1,000 external offerings. Because the law of multiplication is not moved by gestures but activated by truth. When this is understood, there will be no more saying, I don't have enough to give, because it will be known that all that I am has already been given to the Spirit, and that giving is the beginning of the visible kingdom. It is not built from outside, it is built from the invisible altar of thought. The reader who walks with this consciousness will never fear scarcity, because they will know that where their mind is, there also is their multiplication. This is how the law operates. This is how abundance is decreed. This is how the kingdom is established. Nothing else remains but to consecrate. Think in spirit, think from truth, think as one who has already received. And then the visible will be called to reflect the invisible, because there is no other source, no other law, no other power outside of thought already offered as sacred tribute. Chapter 3. The High Place of Thought. Every consecrated thought ascends, not in time, not in space, but in nature. The thought that rises to the principle does not get lost in the immensity of the Spirit. It becomes it. There is no distance between the mind and God. There are levels of consciousness. There are invisible steps that are not climbed by effort, but by purity. And every time a thought renounces the human and aligns with the absolute, it is already in the high place. It is not about thinking about the spiritual, but thinking from the spiritual. That is the true ascent. The mind that still calculates good moves in the low. The mind that decrees good, already done, dwells in the high. Not because it is better, not because it has earned merit, but because it has remembered its origin. The high place of thought is not reached by those who do much, but by those who cease to make much unnecessary. Here it is declared that external activity will never be equivalent to the inner power of consecrated thought, because the spirit does not respond to the quantity of works, but to the quality of consciousness. It is not doing that transforms, it is being that establishes. Whoever believes that action precedes result still lives under the law of external cause. But whoever knows that aligned thought is already substance no longer acts to achieve, but rests in what has been achieved. Doing does not disappear, but it no longer commands. It becomes an expression of being. The high place does not annul action. It redeems it, gives it direction, rhythm, and truth, but does not allow it to act out of fear, impulse, desire, or urgency. It only acts from what has already been decreed, the invisible. The reader who seeks results will find themselves repeating formulas without effect. But the one established in high thought no longer needs results because they know what is in the spirit is already in the depths, and that depth is their reality. They need no witnesses, no signs, no sight to believe, because they have already seen from the place where only the eternal reveals itself. And from there, time does not dictate rhythm. From there, the mind needs no proof. It only confirms what has already been confirmed at the source. The high place of thought is not visited, it is inhabited. It is not a passing emotional state, nor a mystical exaltation. It is a settled position. Just as the throne does not need to be proven, so the consecrated thought needs no validation. Doubt does not enter there. Urgency does not exist there. The soul remembers that it is not alone, not separate, not incomplete. Because where thought has been enthroned, separation dissolves. There is no two, no distance, no waiting. Thought is in God, and therefore all is there. Here is taught how to build that internal altar, not with ideas, not with disciplines, but with selection. The mind is not free land, it is a temple, and in the temple the profane does not enter. Impure thoughts do not wander there, not evil but ignorance, thoughts that fear, demand, project, compare, calculate. Every thought that does not bear the crown of principle must be expelled, not with force, not with hatred, but with light. The altar is lit, truth is enthroned, and all that is incompatible dissolves by itself. Thought cannot be elevated while images of the world are entertained as real. The image of the world must be seen for what it is, shadow. What shines is not the form but the consciousness that sustains it. And when consciousness changes throne, the form follows. The reader must recognize that every thought offered to the spirit no longer belongs to them. It is a sacrifice, and as such, it is not taken back, not doubted, not analyzed. It is given, declared holy, and allowed to act. The internal altar is not built with mechanical affirmations, but with silence and vigilance. Every time you think, you choose. Every time you focus attention, you worship. Every time you speak a word, you establish an altar. To what thought are you consecrating your word? To what image are you giving your attention? What are you enthroning on the throne of your mind? These questions are not asked to judge, but to awaken, because distracted mind is the only cause of disordered manifestation. There is no disorder outside consciousness that has forgotten whom it serves. Here it is decreed, the thought that bears the crown of principle is the only one with authority, not because it shouts, not because it imposes, but because it is real. And the real does not need to impose itself. It only needs to be recognized. Once recognized, everything else kneels before it, not out of obedience but by nature, because the world responds to thought as the reflection responds to the face. There is no delay, no error, only degree of recognition. The high place of thought is not a summit to conquer, it is a position to reclaim. The soul has known it. The soul has inhabited it. It has only been entertained by shadows. But today, by consecrating thought, the soul returns to its throne, and from that throne it does not beg, it decrees. It does not desire, it establishes. It does not seek, it confirms. This is the difference between thinking as a human and thinking as spirit. The reader who feels weak does not need more strength. They need to remember their position, because power is not in what is done, but in the place from which one thinks. The one who thinks from below will always strive. The one who thinks from above is already resting, not because inactive, but because their action no longer springs from fear, it springs from principle. And all that springs from principle carries within it the mark of multiplication. Here ends the illusion of effort. Here is revealed the secret of being. Elevated thought does not struggle to change the world, it transcends it, and by transcending, transforms it, because form obeys the thought that has been enthroned. There is no other power, no other cause, no other altar, only the altar of thought that knows who it is. And that thought does not fear, that thought does not doubt, that thought does not mix, that thought reigns. Chapter 4. The False Tithe of Fear. All fear is an unconscious act of worship. It does not matter its form, intensity, or apparent cause. Fear is a tribute, a surrender, a recognition of power outside of God. And every false recognition, even if it is not spoken aloud, even if it is not written in words, even if it is not confessed, still acts. The thought that fears has already built an altar, has already offered, has already declared, "This has power over me." The Spirit does not punish that act, but it cannot dwell in it. Not because the Spirit withdraws, but because the mind that has tithed to fear no longer sees it, and what is unseen truly cannot manifest. Here is revealed one of the deepest causes of spiritual contradiction. The soul that desires to ascend, but continues feeding with its thought that which denies the Spirit. The reader must understand that one does not only tithe with intention, but with attention, with emotion, within a language. If the first reaction to a problem is worry, then a false altar has already been established. It does not matter how much one prays afterward, nor how many affirmations are recited. The first offering was to illusion, and that offering has already begun to multiply because the law is impartial. It multiplies all that is consecrated, both the high and the low, the truth and the appearance. Because it does not judge, it reflects. Many say, "I do not want to fear," yet they continue contemplating scenarios, consequences, possibilities of loss. And each of those images is a mental sacrifice. Each one is an act of inverted faith. Believing in sickness, failure, abandonment, limitation is not realism, it is idolatry, because everything regarded as real outside the principle is a mental image that has usurped the altar. Fear is the most sophisticated form of worship to error. It does not shout like hatred, nor burn like anger, but it builds subtle temples where truth is no longer named. Here it is taught that tithe cannot coexist. The altar is not plural. One cannot offer one thought to the Spirit and another to the shadow. One cannot affirm the truth and contemplate the possibility of error. One cannot declare God is my substance and at the same time calculate how to avoid loss, because calculation is already an offering, because strategy is already a mental sacrifice to the God of fear. There is no neutrality in thought. Every thought is already an act of tithing. The question is not whether you are tithing, but to what you are tithing. The reader must look at their life with radical sincerity. What thought rises first in the morning? Is it truth or foresight of difficulty? What voice governs before sleep? Is it decree or rehearsal of uncertainty? What words are spoken in daily conversation? Are they affirmations of the real or diagnoses of the visible? In each of those moments, the soul has placed something on the altar, and if it is not the principle, it is appearance, and if it is not the Spirit, it is the projection of fear. No mixture survives in truth. The false tithe is more common than the true because it has been taught as prudence, as maturity, as common sense. But the world's common sense is madness before the law, because it says, prepare for the worst, and that is already a prayer. It says, be careful, and that is already a decree. It says, let's see if it works, and that is already an enthroned doubt. Truth does not wait to be. Truth does not consult history to decide its power. Truth does not adapt to circumstances. It establishes itself, and only the one who establishes it first can call themselves priest of the Spirit. There is no neutrality. There is no thought that does not build an altar. Every time you fear, you have lit incense in a temple without God, and that incense perfumes life with its invisible poison. The reader who understands this will not take a single thought lightly. They will not justify it by context. They will not excuse it by experience. They will not explain it with reasons, because they will know that thought once offered does not return empty, and fear once contemplated becomes form. Here the soul that has feared is not condemned but awakened. It is shown that every thought of doubt is a brick in a false altar, that every negative visualization is a liturgical act to the God of separation, that each worried word is an offering demanding result, and the law not resisting delivers it, not as punishment but by correspondence. The altar must be cleansed, not with guilt, not with ritual, but with light, discernment, and new choice. The old thought need not be destroyed. It only needs to be set aside, and in its place the consecrated thought elevated. Where once one thought, I might fail, now one says, all has already been fulfilled in God. Where once it was said, I don't know how I will get through this, now one affirms, the intelligence of the Spirit is my unchanging guide. Where once there was calculation, now there is certainty. Where once there was anxiety, now there is rest. This is not optimism, this is mental sovereignty. The world is not changed by fearing what might happen. The world is transformed by refusing to tithe to illusion. Every thought is already a seed, and the soul's soil does not ask if the seed is good or bad. It only bears fruit of what it has received. The reader who wishes to see truth manifest must stop offering shadow to their consciousness. They must close the inner temple's doors to every thought that does not bear the seal of the principle. And by doing so, the altar will be rekindled, because the Spirit has not left. It only awaited a place worthy to be inhabited. Fear is a false god. It is a mental calf. It deserves neither analysis nor respect nor argument. It only deserves to be denied. It has no power, no substance, no origin in God, and therefore no permanence. But as long as it is offered thought, attention, emotion, word, image, it will have body. And that body will be the obstacle the soul says it wants to transcend, without seeing that it itself sustains it. Here it is declared, no more tithing to fear, no more offerings to doubt, no more words surrendered to human calculation. Because the Spirit does not dwell where the altar has become a mixture. The Spirit does not share its throne with fear, and the soul that truly desires to live in truth must sweep the temple of words, images, and silent thoughts. There is no error where thought has been cleansed. There is no shadow where consciousness has been consecrated. There is no power outside the Spirit, and the Spirit does not dwell where fear is sacrificed. Here begins purification. Here ends the illusion of prudence. Here the altar is restored, and all that is offered there will multiply its kind. Let the consecrated thought be your only offering, because only then will you see that the kingdom does not wait to be called. It only waits for the false to be silenced. Chapter 5. Thought as the first fruit. The first determines the whole not because it imposes, but because it establishes direction. Every beginning is a silent consecration. There is no neutrality in the first thought. There, without words, the nature of the day, the bond, the creation is signed. That is why the Spirit demands the first, not out of necessity, not out of divine ego, but because the first has authority over everything that follows. Spiritual order does not begin when the soul wills it. It begins when the soul recognizes, and the first thing recognized holds the scepter. The reader must understand that the principle of first fruits is not metaphorical. It is a mental law. The first of the day, the first of the soul, the first of the being must be a consecrated thought, not as routine, but as enthronement, not as habit, but as a priestly act. Because wherever the first thought aligns with the spirit, everything else falls into its orbit. The mind is like a house shaped by its first stone, and that stone is the initial idea. If that idea is born of fear, the whole structure will have cracks. If that idea is born of the I am, everything built upon it will be a fortress. Many awaken with borrowed thoughts, unresolved memories, fears, fragments of the unfinished, but they don't realize that at that instant they have offered their altar. They have ceded the throne of the day before fully opening their eyes. There is no clear consciousness when the first image received is not God. Here it is taught that the first thought is a decree. It doesn't matter if it was not spoken aloud. The thought that arises at the threshold between sleep and wakefulness is a prayer more powerful than 1,000 words repeated without presence. Because there is no defense, no pretense. There the soul reveals itself as it is. The spirit does not demand beautiful words. It demands the first place, not out of jealousy, but because truth does not operate in the background. The second thought can correct, but it does not establish. The third can redeem, but it does not determine. Only the first has the quality to sow the axis, and that axis does not move by itself. Everything that turns during the day revolves around that first mental offering. That is why the spirit seeks not quantity, but quality. The first thought is not measured in minutes, it is measured in origin. Was it born in God or in the world? The soul that understands this does not allow any day to begin by accident. It does not let itself be dragged by the impulse of habit. It does not surrender its attention to what remains unfinished or feared. It stops its mind in the antechamber of action and offers its first thought to the altar. It can be silence, an affirmation, a pure visualization, but it must be conscious, it must be surrender, it must be truth. Because everything that comes after will be shadow or reflection of that beginning. This is not about controlling every thought. It is about enthroning the first, because that first is a seed. And the seed carries within it the nature of the fruit. There is no apple tree that produces pears. There is no consecrated thought that produces disorder. There may be trials, there may be noise, but all that will be accessory, not central, because the center has already been fixed. The first thought has declared the royalty of the Spirit, and where the Spirit reigns, form aligns. Many rise and rush into the world without having visited their altar. They have not lit the lamp within, and then wonder why they stumble on shadows. It is not punishment, it is law. The thought that was not consecrated was taken, and everything taken without an altar becomes debt. But what is given as first fruit never returns empty, because the Spirit does not ignore what is given first. It recognizes it, honors it, multiplies it. The reader who wants to see transformation must not seek grand gestures. They must guard the first thought, the first word, the first decision, because in them there is no routine, there is creation. The day does not begin when the door opens. It begins when the thought is offered to the principle, and if that thought is pure, everything else will be a mirror. If that thought is mixed, everything else will be confusion. There is no difference between the spiritual and the everyday when the first thought has been consecrated, because then everything turns to giving. The body becomes a temple, work becomes prayer, relationships become sacred covenants, because the axis has been fixed in truth, and from there everything revolves with purpose. The path is not lost when the center has been sealed. Only the soul that forgets to consecrate its dawn goes astray. This is not a call to discipline. It is a reminder of sovereignty. You decide the first thought, and with that choice, you decide the internal climate of everything that follows. You may think God is here, or you may think, what do I have to resolve today? The first elevates, the second disperses. There is no neutrality. Every beginning is a surrender. Make it the Spirit. Here is revealed the secret cause of many unanswered prayers. They were spoken from a second place. They were words cast from a consciousness that had already tithed fear. The altar was occupied. Truth cannot be placed on an altar where doubt reigns. It must be cleansed. It must be prepared. And that is done in the first thought. Rise then as priest of your temple. Do not let your day begin without fire on the altar. Do not speak, do not walk, do not surrender to the world before placing your mind in God, because the first is what consecrates the rest. And where the first fruit is sacred, the whole tree becomes incorruptible. Thus the kingdom begins each day, not with miracles, with thought, not with signs, with choice, not with emotions, with sovereignty. And whoever offers their first fruit to the Spirit will see that they need nothing else, because everything else will be added, not as reward but as reflection, because what is first reigns, and where consecrated thought reigns, truth cannot be stopped. Chapter 6. The tithe of the word. The word is not a sound, it is not art. It is not an ornament of thought. The word is form, and every form pronounced from consciousness is a sealed manifestation. To speak is not to communicate. To speak is to create. Every time a mouth opens, a decree has been issued. There is no neutrality. There is no word that is not a seed. There is no voice that is not an altar. Therefore, whoever speaks without consecrating their language has already tithed the chaos, because sound without spirit is not silence. It is active shadow. Here it is declared that the true tithe does not end in thought. It continues in the word, because what is secretly thought and spoken aloud is fixed in the visible. The world does not respond to what is felt. The world responds to what is affirmed, not to what is desired in the heart, but to what is authorized with the tongue. Every word is an act of creation. Every phrase is a spiritual coin cast upon the altar of the world. And that altar, which is the collective consciousness, does not distinguish between wisdom and folly. It only receives, only multiplies. Many believe that speaking is harmless, that the spoken word without intention loses power. But the principle recognizes no difference between what is said in solitude or in public, because the soul does not have an audience, it has vibration, and every time it speaks it reveals itself. What is said is what is believed. What is affirmed is what is consecrated. What is repeated is what is worshipped. The reader who speaks of the problem has already declared their altar. The reader who describes scarcity has already made their offering. The reader who comments on illness, conflict, error has already sown their seed, and the law that is not resisted has already been accepted. Silence is not enough. Silence without truth is not holiness. It is empty space where error can also grow. Only the word born from the Spirit cleanses the mental ground. Only the consecrated affirmation transforms the invisible field. The reader must not fear to speak. They must consecrate what they speak, because silencing the false does not build if the true is not affirmed. The Spirit does not manifest through omission, it manifests through decree. Speaking from the I am is the highest act of the soul, because it is not description, it is creation. When one says, I am peace, one does not express a wish, one establishes a law. When one says, I am abundance, one does not deny what is seen, one corrects it. Because the word does not reflect appearance, it reveals truth. There is no magic in phrases, there is power in the source from which they are spoken. If the mind is divided, the word will be mixed. If the mind is consecrated, the word will be a scepter. Here it is taught that there is no innocent word. Every joke has a seed, every comment has a root. Every diagnosis has an altar. When one says, this always happens to me, a pattern has been invoked. When one affirms, that's how things are, a world has been fixed. The reader must recognize that every word is a spiritual contract, and every contract has consequences, not as punishment, but by nature. The word, once spoken, seeks fulfillment, and does so with inflexible fidelity. There is no need for eloquence. A vast vocabulary is not required. Purity of intention is demanded. Alignment with the principle is demanded, because a single phrase born of I am has more power than 1,000 speeches born of fear. Truth does not need explanation. It is pronounced, and by being pronounced, it works. Truth spoken from the Spirit does not ask for permission. It establishes itself because the Word is the active form of consecrated thought. And where there is consecrated thought and coherent word, no shadow remains. Many pray in secret but contradict their prayer with what they say in the street. Many affirm from faith but nullify it from habit. They say, "I am healthy," but comment, "I always get sick in winter." They declare, "God is my provision," but murmur, "Money never lasts." They speak from two altars, and those two altars cannot coexist. The Spirit demands purity, not of conduct, but of word, because the word is vibratory conduct, spiritual action, definitive sowing. The reader who wants to see change must not control the world. They must watch their voice not out of fear but out of authority, because speaking from truth is ruling. And everything spoken in the name of I Am will carry the weight of the principle. It is not ritual, it is power, not a magic phrase. And every key opens or closes worlds. Here the value of the verb is restored, not as grammar, but as alchemy, because the correct word spoken from the inner altar transmutes all appearance. It is impossible to speak from the Spirit and not see results. It may take time, but in the kingdom it is already fulfilled, because what is spoken from the I Am has already been sown in certain soil. There is no barrenness when truth has been spoken. Therefore, all language is prayer, even if it doesn't seem so, even if it is not called that. Saying "I can't" is praying to the God of limitation. Saying "it's difficult" is praying to the God of effort. Saying "this is how I am" is praying to the God of the past self. But saying "I am what God is" returning to the legitimate altar. It is putting the word on its throne. It is restoring the crown. The reader must assume their voice as priesthood, not as individual expression, but as a divine channel. Every word is a coin cast upon the altar of the world. To which altar are you casting your voice? What world are you decreeing with every conversation, with every piece of advice, with every story? It is not enough to avoid speaking negatively. One must speak from the light. One must declare what is unseen so it may manifest. One must name what already is in spirit so the visible can recognize it. The word is the second tithe. After thought, the verb is offered, and when both are humble, the temple is ignited. There is no prayer more powerful than an affirmation born from consecrated consciousness, and there is no firmer altar than the mouth that serves only the I Am. Here ends the profane use of the tongue. Here begins the priestly verb. No more empty comments, no more phrases without origin, no more words borrowed from habit. Only decree, only truth, only alignment. Because speaking is giving form, and whoever gives form in the name of the Spirit is already creating the kingdom on earth. Not from hope, but from authority. Not from desire, but from truth. Not from the small self, but from the I Am. Chapter 7. The Tribute of Attention. Attention is not mere focus, it is a flame. It is a priestly ray from the soul that consecrates whatever it looks upon. There is no act more powerful than attending, because by looking existence is granted, and by contemplating reality is established. What is ignored dissolves. What is attended to becomes law. There is no distinction between looking and worshipping. Everything that holds attention has already been elevated to an altar. The reader who understands this will know that there is no neutrality or passivity in looking. It is a tribute with the eyes, even without words. It builds with the gaze, even without intention. Here it is revealed that attention is the most constant, the most daily, the most unnoticed tithe. While walking, one attends. While remembering, one attends. While listening, one attends. And each act of attention, like a ray emitted from the center of the soul, is decreeing, "This deserves my creative energy." There is no sustained thought that does not feed on attention, and what is fed multiplies. Thus the law operates, without emotion, without judgment, without pause, not as punishment, but as a reflex. What is contemplated becomes more. There are no exceptions. The mind that contemplates error has already tithed the error. It doesn't matter if it rejects it, analyzes it, or fights it. By giving it attention, it has delivered it an altar. Attention does not distinguish between acceptance or rejection. It only knows that what is looked upon has been named as real. That is why many who say they fight evil, in fact, multiply it, because they contemplate it, study it, discuss it, name it, and the law responds to the altar that is lit. It does not distinguish between opposition or devotion. It only knows that there is a gaze, and where there is a gaze, there is a seed. The Spirit does not demand that the world be ignored. It demands that it be looked at from a higher place. Appearance is not denied, it is transfigured, and this is done by looking through the eye of the inner Christ. That eye does not see through the flesh, does not see through judgment, does not see through habit. It sees through truth. It sees the eternal even in the temporary. It sees light even in the shadow. It sees the principle even in decay, and that gaze transforms because it does not remain in form. It goes beyond. The gaze of the inner Christ is the only instrument capable of tithing correctly. Everything else is distraction. Many offer prayers, words, rituals, but tithe their attention to conflict, diagnosis, news, statistics, history, symptoms. And then they wonder why their prayer bears no fruit, because the main altar, the altar of attention, is consecrated to appearance. You cannot serve two sources. You cannot measure the visible with fear and expect the invisible to manifest. Attention must be aligned, not occasionally, not only in moments of crisis, but as a continuous offering. This chapter does not call for blindness. It calls for the cleansing of vision. It calls to lift the eye. It calls to hold the gaze on that which is not seen by the eyes, but is known by the Spirit. There lies true abundance, there lies health, there lies guidance, there lies the kingdom. The reader who trains their attention to remain on the principle will be like one who walks on water, not because they deny the waves, but because they do not look at them. Their attention is above, and where attention is, there is law. There is no greater difficulty than this, to guard attention. Because the world shouts, habit pushes, emotion drags, but the sovereign soul knows that attending is ruling, and where the eye fixes, the throne is fixed. That is why attention cannot be scattered. It cannot be lent at random. It cannot be gifted to that which does not build. Each conversation, each image, each memory is an act of attention. What is being built with that act? What altar is being lit with that gaze? Here it is taught that the training of the soul does not begin with great decisions, but with the strict selection of the object contemplated. To contemplate truth, even when everything else shouts otherwise. To hold the image of perfection amid fragmentation, not as denial, but as decree. Conserved attention is not evasion, it is establishment. One does not escape the world, one reconstructs it from the eye of the Spirit. The reader who learns to look with sacred intention no longer lives by reflex, no longer reacts to the apparent, no longer is moved by the provisional, because they know that their attention is the rudder and their gaze is the seed. And what is contemplated today will be lived tomorrow, not by karma, but by coherence. The tithe of attention is the most constant because it does not depend on speaking or acting. Even in silence one attends, even in rest one looks. Therefore, whoever offers their attention to the Spirit is never without guidance or provision, because they have continuously declared, "This is what I recognize as real." And the law that never sleeps answers, "This is what will manifest as form. It is not a matter of force, it is a matter of choice. Steel discipline is not required, discernment is required, and once the object of tribute is discerned, to hold it, not rigidly, but with devotion. Because the gaze held on God is not tense, it is luminous, it is rest, it is royalty. Here it is declared, no more tithe of attention to chaos, no more inadvertent worship of illusion, no more contemplation of symptoms as truth, no more fascination with fragmentation. From now on, attention will be sword, will be incense, will be decree, and everything looked upon from the eternal Christ will bear the mark of the kingdom. Let your eye be one, let your gaze be thrown, let your contemplation be altar. Because attention is more than focus, it is creation. And the soul that knows how to look from above will not fear what is below. Because where attention has been consecrated, life itself has already been consecrated. And the one who has consecrated their life to the Spirit no longer waits for provision but lives from it, not because they deserve it, but because they contemplate it. And to contemplate is to declare, and to declare is to do, and to do from truth is to manifest the kingdom without interruption. Chapter 8. Tithing as royal decree. It is not asked for, it is proclaimed, it is not negotiated, it is established, it is not begged, it is declared. This is the language of the Spirit, and whoever speaks it has remembered their lineage. The I Am does not plead, the I Am decrees. And every decree born from the altar of consecrated consciousness is irrevocable, not by personal will, but by divine identity. Here, decree is not spoken of as a formula, nor as a tool of the lower mind trying to manipulate results. Here, decree is the direct expression of the principle, the emanation of the inner throne that knows no opposition or reply. The true mental tithe is a sentence pronounced from the sovereignty of the I Am. It is a spiritual, judicial act. It is the voice that establishes what is, regardless of appearances. One does not decree from desire, but from truth. One does not affirm to convince, but because one knows. One does not repeat to achieve, but because one reveals what already exists. The soul that decrees from the altar is not creating something new. It is recognizing the eternal, and the eternal once named manifests. The language of the inner king is not mixed with doubt, has no reversals, and admits no conditional clauses. It says, I am health, and health is. It says, I am abundance, and abundance is ordered. It says, I am peace, and peace establishes its reign, not because it is longed for, but because it is recognized. The decree is the highest form of mental tithe, because it does not merely contemplate, affirm, or think, it declares. And what is declared from the principle cannot be undone by circumstance. The human mind has been trained to ask, to negotiate with God as if God were a distant entity dispensing gifts according to merit or pleading. But the truth declares that the Spirit has already given, that the kingdom has already been delivered, that all fullness has already been prepared, and the only act required is recognition. The decree does not create, the decree reveals. And as the soul decrees from its inner altar, all appearances foreign to the kingdom begin to yield, not because they are fought, but because they are displaced. The reader must understand that a decree is not an attempt, it is an authority. It is not tested, it is pronounced. And what is pronounced, if it comes from the I Am, carries the force of law. The world may not see it yet. Forms may delay reflecting what is established, but there is no waiting in the kingdom, only deferred reflection in matter. The decree has already been sealed in the invisible. The visible can only adjust. This chapter restores the lost word, the sleeping tongue, the word without a throne. Here it is remembered that speaking is not art, it is power, and speaking from the I Am is exercising spiritual governance. Therefore, one does not decree randomly, nor improvise truth. One pronounces from the fire of the altar, and that fire consumes all doubt, all calculation, all worldly projection. The decree is pure, or it is not. The decree is vertical, or it does not operate. The decree is the seal of the soul that has remembered it, did not come to ask, but to establish. The difference between petition and decree is the difference between servant and king. The servant waits. The king pronounces. The servant explains. The king commands. The servant consults. The king reveals. Whoever has understood their position as bearer of the I Am no longer speaks from the valley, but from the mountain, not from superiority, but from clarity, because they are no longer confused about their place in the divine order. It is not about repeating phrases with force. It is about being in the internal place from which the decree naturally flows. That place is the altar, and that altar is not built with will, but with surrender, the surrender of judgment, personal desire, and fear. Only there, in the emptiness of the ego, can the decree be born pure, unmixed with human intention, unconditioned by visible results, but ignited by certainty that needs no proof. Every true decree is irreversible, not because it cannot be denied by the lower mind, but because the spirit never retracts what it has pronounced. The soul that decrees from the I am may doubt again, may lower its gaze again, may even forget its scepter, but the decree has already been issued, and the law already upholds it. The only task is to remain in recognition, not for it to work, but to avoid interference. Here a fundamental correction is made. One does not decree to change appearance. One decrees because appearance has no power. One does not decree to bring something forth, but because one already is. One does not decree for something to come, but because all has already been given. This is the language of the inner king. There is no pleading, no urgency, no delay. There is authority, alignment, certainty. The reader who wishes to live from truth must begin to speak as one who has inherited the kingdom, not from arrogance, but from obedience to their divine nature. It is not about imposing on the world. It is about restoring the language that creates the world. And that language is not made of opinions, observations, or diagnoses. It is made of living word, a word that does not describe, but establishes. This is the true tithe, the decree pronounced clearly from the altar. It is not offered to the spirit of thought with only part of the word. It gives everything, and in that total giving, the soul becomes a channel of the irreversible. One does not decree to control, one decrees to manifest. One does not decree to obtain, one decrees to align. One does not decree to test, one decrees because one knows. And whoever knows from the I am no longer asks, only proclaims. And what is proclaimed becomes flesh because it cannot be otherwise, because the word of God in the mouth of the preserved soul never returns empty. Chapter 9. Breaking the idols of need. Every thought of need is idolatry, no matter its form, its intensity, or its justification. The moment the soul declares something is lacking, it has raised a foreign god. It has replaced the spirit with a mental image that demands, pleads, and consumes. And that image, though it may have no face or name, acts as power. Because everything recognized as lack has already been enthroned as authority. The soul that says, I need, has affirmed, this is greater than God. Whether it knows it or not, whether it wants to or not, whether it denies it or not. There is no difference between worshipping a carved idol and holding on to a perceived need with thought. Both acts declare God is not enough. The lower mind is accustomed to creating mental calves, not made of gold but of ideas, need for money, need for affection, need for approval, need for belonging. Each of these figures is a psychic construction that usurps the altar, because where it is declared that something is missing, presence has been denied. The spirit does not coexist with lack, not by whim but by nature. Wherever need is affirmed, the spirit becomes displaced, because it cannot be the whole in a temple where something external has been recognized as the source. Here is taught the destruction of the mental calf, not with violence, not with rejection, but with revelation, because the idol has no power by itself. It is sustained only by the attention given to it. And every thought sustained in the idea of lack is inverted worship. There is no legitimate need, no justified lack. Every need is a false image sustained by the soul that has not yet recognized its completeness in being. The spirit does not need. The spirit is. And the I am aligned with it also does not need. It only recognizes. The reader must look precisely at those areas of consciousness where they have allowed need to become a throne, where they have said, I lack, where they have repeated, I do not have. Where they have believed that if something does not come, then fullness is suspended. Each of these thoughts is a genuflection before an image that is not God, and everything that is not God, no matter how reasonable it seems, is error. not morally, but metaphysically. Breaking the idols of need requires a complete inversion of the mental order, because the world has taught that first you get and then you rest. But truth declares, first fullness is recognized, and then everything manifests. There is no deeper error than believing that the external satisfies the internal, because in doing so the world is made the source. And the world is not the source, it is a reflection. Whoever seeks in the reflection what must arise from the center will always feel empty, even if their hands are filled. Need is not an emotion, it is a declaration. Every time I need is affirmed, the I am has been displaced. It has been said to the Spirit, your presence is not enough. It has been said to the I am, you are not sufficient. And in that act the flow has been interrupted, not because God is offended, but because the channel has been sealed from within. The soul has looked towards the apparent, and the apparent has no power by itself. It only has power to the extent consciousness grants it. The true tithe is to the invisible. It is not given to form, not to result, not to need. It is given to what is unseen but sustains, to what is immeasurable but governs, to what is not possessed because it already is. Tithing to the invisible is declaring, though my eyes do not see it, my soul already recognizes it. It is affirming, I am complete now. It is proclaiming, nothing is lacking because the source is within me. The mental calf is not broken by denial. It is broken by light, the light of recognition, the light of decree, the light of truth upheld without faltering. The reader must face every thought of need and look at it with the eye of the Spirit, not to reprimand it, but to dissolve it, because every need is shadow, and shadow has no substance. It only has a place where the light has not been lit. There is no true need, only truth not contemplated. The soul that says, I need money, has forgotten that the principle of supply is internal. The soul that says, I need company, has denied that the I am is full presence. The soul that says, I need healing, has forgotten that health is the nature of being. Desire is not denied, idolatry is denied. Because desire, when born from the Spirit, does not declare lack, it declares expansion. But need cries out from emptiness, and by crying it perpetuates itself. Here it is taught that every mental idol can and will fall, the instant thought is consecrated to the invisible, not by effort, by firmness, not by repression, by substitution, not by struggle, but by surrender. Because where the Spirit has been recognized as source, there can be no other, and where there is no other source, there can be no lack. The visible will obey. Sooner or later matter submits to Spirit when Spirit has been established as the only power. The reader who seeks liberation from anxiety does not need more resources. They need to look at the calf they worship and dismantle it with truth. Where do they believe something external will complete them? Where are they waiting for something in order to be? Where are they substituting Spirit with an image? There is no peace in that waiting because everything expected from need has already failed before arriving, not because the object is bad, but because the altar was already occupied. Here the end of the cult of need is decreed. No more thoughts saying, I lack, no more visualizations arising from urgency, no more decrees contaminated by unconscious desires. From now on, everything is declared from sufficiency, not because it is had, but because it is. And what is in spirit cannot lack in form, because form is not origin, it is echo. Breaking the idol of need is not rejecting the human, it is remembering the divine. It is affirming, even if all disappears, I am. It is proclaiming, even if the world is silent, the voice of God never ceases in me. It is establishing nothing external defines me because being is not measured by what it receives, but by what it recognizes as its own from the beginning. Thus the calf is destroyed, thus the throne is restored, thus the soul is consecrated. Not by worshipping form, not by waiting for results, not by chasing the visible, but by tithing every thought to the invisible. There true wealth begins, there seeking ends. there the kingdom is born, and where the kingdom is born, need disappears like fog before the sun, because it was never real, because it was never God, because the light of being knows no shadow. Chapter 10. The treasure of elevated thought. There is no loss where the mind has been offered. There cannot be, because the soul that has surrendered its thought to the Spirit no longer lives in the world's accounting. It lives in the immutable deposit of the kingdom. Every consecrated thought is a jewel deposited in the eternal treasure, inaccessible to wear, inflation, theft, calculation, or cycles. No external economy can add or subtract value from the spiritual deposit built by the mind, aligned with truth. The reader who has understood the previous chapters must now know that every elevated thought has been invested in the kingdom, and that kingdom suffers no loss. Here a greater mystery is revealed. Mental tithing not only cleanses the conscience and reorganizes form, it simultaneously builds an invisible field of wealth that surrounds the soul with an unchanging atmosphere. This wealth is not metaphor, not imagination. It is vibratory substance, silent magnetism, an unbreakable reserve that begins to envelop the soul as a living law. Every elevated thought has been stored in this treasure, and each one acts as a seed of provision at the exact moment appearance attempts to sow lack. No error can penetrate the mental field of one who has continuously invested in consecrated thought. The world celebrates saving, investment, and external multiplication. The kingdom is based on a different law. What is given to God in thought is never lost and never returns without multiplying. When one says, "I offer my mind to the Spirit," a decree of eternal accumulation has been issued, not of possessions, but of principle, because every thought offered at the altar becomes an energetic structure that remains. There is no time that erodes it, no system that devalues it, no force that steals it, because it is not in the visible, it is in the eternal. Many believe that when they think from truth but do not see immediate results, their work has been in vain. They do not understand that every elevated thought has been sealed as treasure, and that treasure operates on levels deeper than matter. It may not manifest according to the human calendar, but it acts according to the law that knows no interruption. The reader who has tithed their mind from the beginning must know that loss is impossible. The deposit has been made, and the visible cannot prevent the harvest when the seed has already been sown in the invisible. This chapter is not a promise, it is a reminder, an adjustment, a restoration of divine mathematics that does not operate on human merit, but on the spiritual act of conserving the mind. While the world builds external reserves subject to fluctuation, the soul that offers its thought to God builds a field of wealth that sustains, guides, and provides regardless of what the world calls a crisis. No market can collapse the field of elevated thought, because that field does not depend on projections, but on truth. It does not respond to the environment, it transforms it. Every tribute of elevated thought builds a kingdom. Not a psychological kingdom, but a real kingdom made of vibration, spiritual structure, and silent magnetism that begins to surround the soul with an atmosphere of anticipated fullness. Opportunities come effortlessly, doors open without explanation. Guidance appears unasked, not because the soul has requested it, but because the soul has built it. What once seemed invisible now begins to press on the visible. What was internal now demands expression, not by desire but by law. The mind that has tithed again and again to the invisible begins to live inside a different sphere. It is not superior, it is different. The rules change. Need is not perceived as urgency, but as adjustment. Lack is not seen as threat, but as a momentary illusion. Because the soul knows its field is full, because it has sown, because it has tithed, because it has invested its attention, its word, its decree, its silence, its thought in what cannot be seen but is more real than all that is visible. The reader who wants to see provision without effort must look inside their inner bank. What have they been thinking? What have they been sustaining? What have they been contemplating? Because all of that has been a deposit, Every thought sustained in truth is invisible gold. Every decree born of the I Am is a luminous jewel. Every silence that has rejected doubt is a fertile seed. And all of that forms a treasure that, when the time comes, translates into the visible with mathematical precision. This chapter teaches not to beg for manifestation. The soul that has built its treasure does not need to ask. It only needs to remember. It only needs to look from above and know the harvest is already there. Even if it is not in the hands, it is in the atmosphere. Even if it is not in the eyes, it is in the field, and that field, in its perfect time, will translate everything, not by magic, but by law. It is not about expecting reward. It is about knowing the deposit is real. It is about leaving behind fluctuating faith and embracing the structural certainty of principle. Every thought that honors God in the midst of apparent scarcity has been an offering sealed in the eternal treasure. No drop is lost, no prayer is empty, no affirmation is useless when pronounced from the altar. The soul that knows this no longer fears fluctuation because it knows its wealth is not in the external bank, nor in social acceptance, nor in a full agenda. It is in the deep level where thousands of elevated thoughts have been sown that now vibrate as shield, as field, as response. No one sees that treasure, but all perceive its effect. There are those who walk with a peace that does not depend on the environment. There are those who enter a room and everything is ordered, not because they know more, but because they have built more, not by human merit, but by spiritual practice. Here it is declared that true capital is not in the bank account. It is in the vibratory structure built by consecrated thoughts. That is the treasure of the soul that has remembered its priestly office. And that treasure is not lost, not devalued, not dissolved. It expands. The reader who from today understands that their mind is the place of eternal investment will stop wasting thoughts on complaint, fear, judgment, or expectation. They will begin to think like one who builds, to see like one who sows, to speak like one who invests, because every idea offered to truth has already been stored. And when the time comes, it will be released in form, provision, guidance, or visible miracle, not as exception but as coherence, because the treasure of elevated thought is not subject to the law of the world. It is backed by the law of the kingdom. Chapter 11. The altar that is unseen yet acts. The true altar is not built with hands, cannot be seen or touched, requires no stone, gold, or incense, and yet it acts. It acts with silent power, incorruptible precision, and unavoidable effect, because the unseen altar is the only one that moves what is visible. The visible world is a delayed replica of the inner altar. Everything the soul experiences as form, circumstance, or destiny is born in the secret altar where thought was either consecrated or contaminated. This is the mystery every soul must know if it wishes to stop repeating cycles. There is no external life that is not an echo of the invisible altar of the mind. The spirit needs no cathedrals, expects no incense, demands no ritual words. It activates the instant thought aligns. The altar that calls it is not in Jerusalem, nor Rome, nor any mountain. It is where consciousness is established in truth. This altar is not made. It is revealed not far away, but at the center. Everything the soul calls change, manifestation, or miracle is the reflected effect of the inner altar ignited by consecrated thought. Here we learn that the altar is not built once, but moment by moment. Each time the soul chooses elevated thought, it cleanses its altar. Each time it repeats a truth from the I Am, it rekindles its fire. Each time it withdraws attention from fear and gives it to the Spirit, it has rebuilt the eternal altar. There is no fixed altar, there is a vibrating altar, and that altar is the mind in a state of alignment. Many believe they must go to places, consult authorities, follow external instructions to receive guidance. They do not know their altar is already prepared. They do not know that guidance does not come from outside, but from the level at which their thought has been offered. Everything that seems blocked outside is a reflection of an internal altar abandoned, confused, or mixed. The unaligned mind asks for what it does not recognize, while the aligned mind no longer asks. It recognizes and proclaims. The reader must stop seeking external temples if their inner altar lies in ruins. No technique can replace a mind surrendered to error. No teacher can act in place of thought that still pays tribute to doubt. The altar is not a pretty idea. It is a real point of power, a vibratory core where consecrated thought becomes form, not by desire, but by law. And this law responds not to tears or arguments, but to alignment. Raising the invisible altar does not require much knowledge. It requires choosing again. It is not done by effort, but by surrender. Surrender is not passivity, it is commitment. That is to say, no more throneless thoughts, no more words without an altar, no more emotions without direction. The Spirit acts when the altar is lit, and that altar is lit not with visible fire, but with pure thought. Here it is revealed that all the world calls miracles are nothing more than the coherent action of the Spirit through an activated altar. The miracle does not come from outside. It emerges from the point where consciousness has recognized its source. Wherever the I Am has been enthroned, matter obeys, not with noise but with certainty. The soul that sustains its altar will see how what is external begins to align without struggle, not because the world has changed, but because the altar has been restored. This altar needs no veils, no symbols, no human authorities. It needs vigilance, it needs purity, it needs thought offered without mixture. Because you cannot light an altar while contemplating the shadow, you cannot invoke truth while caressing error. You cannot proclaim the kingdom while thinking from need. The altar demands exclusivity. It is either one or none, and when it is one, it is enough. The human mind has made the sacred a spectacle. It has forgotten that the most sacred happens without witnesses. The instant a soul thinks from the I Am, it has lit the altar. The moment it withdraws judgment and affirms truth, it has restored its center. There is no music, no ceremony, but there is power. And that power, though invisible, manifests in form. The reader must stop measuring progress by what is seen. They must begin to measure it by the state of their altar. Is your thought in alignment? Is your word in agreement with truth? Is your attention placed on the invisible as cause? Then there is no loss. Then it is not delay. Then no error prevails because the invisible altar acts, not when asked, but when allowed. All experienced as external chaos echoes a divided internal altar. All perceived limitation reflects a mind that has paid tribute to more than one source. The altar, when one, cannot fail because it is the seat of the Spirit, and the Spirit, when it rules, orders everything else. The kingdom does not manifest when the soul desires it. It manifests when the altar is clean, active, and enthroned. Here it is declared, your altar is not in another, not in a book, not in a doctrine. It is in your aligned mind. There the Spirit acts without delay. No external evidence is needed to know the altar is operating. What is required is internal coherence, clean thought, offered attention, congruent word, filled silence. From there, the visible will be born as the natural fruit of the fire ignited in secret. Thus is life lived from the invisible altar, not waiting for signs, not begging for approval, not pleading for intervention, but knowing the altar already acts. And all that acts from truth inevitably becomes form, because form is not whim but reflection. And every reflection answers to an altar that is unseen, yet never ceases to burn. Chapter 12. The High Priesthood of the I Am. Here the teaching is consummated. It does not close, it does not conclude. It reveals itself as an endless circle, as a fire that never goes out, as an altar that is never covered. The mental tithe from the beginning of this book has not been a technique nor a symbol. It has been a sacred office, a holy function, a liturgy without a visible temple, without ritual vestments, without a human calendar. The soul that has followed each chapter has been led to a greater recognition. The I Am not only decrees, officiates, it not only proclaims, it dwells. It not only recognizes, it reigns. The mental tithe is the constant act by which the mind surrenders itself to consecrated thought, but not as a subject, as a priest. Each time the I Am chooses a thought in truth, offers it on the altar of the moment, and crowns it with the living word, it is exercising its priestly office. There is no other mediator, no other authority. There is no other instance, there is no distance between consciousness and the source. The I Am is the bridge and the destination, the channel and the decree, the altar and the fire. Here it is established that every mind is a temple, but only the I Am can be its priest. No one else can occupy that place. There is no teacher who speaks for you. There is no guide who can align what you have not enthroned from within. Because the high priest of the inner temple is one, the awakened consciousness that recognizes there is no separation, no delay, no possible delegation. The Spirit demands only one thing, that the thought be offered by one who knows who they are. The world taught that someone must intercede, that the soul must wait, ask, be worthy. But here the dogma is revoked. The I Am does not wait, does not beg, does not consult. The I Am presents itself, rises, establishes itself, offers itself as the channel of the principle, and in doing so becomes the only legitimate priest of its invisible temple. It is not dressed in religion nor morality. It does not adorn itself with mysticism. It clothes itself in truth, and that truth is its garment, its staff, its incense, its decree. Every consecrated thought is a silent liturgy. Every word born from the Spirit is a priestly act, not because the soul sees it, but because the principle recognizes it. At the moment the mind aligns, the altar is lit, and the temple activated. No permission is required, presence is required, because there is no higher function than to think from the I Am and speak from the I Am. There is no history there, no past, no karma, only altar, fire, and kingdom. This book was not a treatise. It was a priestly manual. Each chapter a chamber of the temple, each teaching a key, each declaration an enthronement. It did not teach positive thinking here. It taught priestly thinking, to see as one who presides, to speak as one who consecrates, to walk as one who is already invested. Because the function is not learned, it is remembered. The reader who has come this far is no longer a reader. They are a priest. They no longer study. They officiate. They no longer test. They proclaim. They no longer consult. They establish. And in that establishment the portal has opened, not a portal to another world, but to the only true world, the world of consciousness that knows, that remembers, that pronounces the name not as a phrase, but as incarnation. Because the I Am, when enthroned, needs no further explanation, only manifestation. Here it is revealed that all creation is a liturgical act. Every decree born from the I Am is a living rite. Every thought aligned with the source is a torch that ignites dimensions. The consecrated mind does not merely correct its surroundings, it recreates them. It does not adjust circumstances, it transmutes levels. And that transfiguration is not an event, but a continuous, silent, irrevocable office. There is no higher temple than the consecrated mind. There is no more powerful staff than the word born of the I Am. There is no purer offering than thought delivered without mixture. Therefore the priest does not fear, does not hesitate, does not repeat. They offer, and by offering they activate. By activating they liberate. By liberating they manifest. Because the law responds to the priest who speaks in the name of the principle, not as an echo, but as a living channel. All doubt remains outside the altar. All effort remains outside the temple. All urgency remains outside the liturgy. Here there is only presence, here there is only decree, here there is only certainty. Because one who has remembered their priesthood can no longer return to divided consciousness. They may fall, they may forget, but they cannot deny what has been revealed. And what is revealed is this: you are the eternal priest of the I Am, and the altar is you, and the fire is you, and the truth as well. This chapter does not conclude, because the high priesthood of the I Am has no end. It begins anew each day, each moment, each thought, each word, each gaze. From now on the reader no longer lives by reaction, They live by consecration. They no longer speak by habit. They speak from the throne. They no longer think by reflex. They think from the altar. May everything that comes after this reading be a living liturgy. May every thought be fire. May every word be decree. May every attention be incense. Because the temple has already been opened. Because the altar has already been lit. Because the I Am has already been enthroned. And where he reigns, nothing lacks, nothing is excessive. All is